Hey there, you just clicked on First Down Punts. Nice move. This is a podcast about football and how it relates to fantasy football. Hope you like what you hear. We're going to get this thing started. Let's get crazy. And welcome in to another episode of First Down Punts. I'm your host, Coach Chris. Today we're going to be going over NFL news just all around, Thursday night football preview, and then a little dive into some kick return yardage that's helping out defenses in the NFL and in fantasy football. So, kick this off with some NFL news. Biggest thing, Marvin Harrison had appendectomy surgery and will be out for week 11, possibly week 12. But generally, I shouldn't say generally. In the past, guys have missed a week, only missed 1 week and then got back the following week. But we'll see what happens going forward. But right now, Marvin Harrison is out for week 11. Michael Wilson becomes more of an interesting prospect. And Greg Dortch, even in that slot role, he could definitely have some potential to be a sneaky start there for Cardinals. Packers guard Elgin Jenkins was banged up in the Monday Night Football game. He has a leg fracture and is likely out for the season. C.J. Stroud, who had a concussion in Week 9, missed Week 10. He is still experiencing symptoms, and it sounds like Davis Mills is going to get another start. So, although I didn't have him in my waiver ad video yesterday, I do think he's possible pickup. They play Tennessee this week, which is a not so tough defense to play against. And with Nico Collins and the rest of those guys there, Davis Mills could be a nice little start this week. Oronde Gadsden, big concern for him. He had the MRI on Monday, comes out with a bone bruise. He is practicing Wednesday. Some other guys practicing, Bucky Irving and Chris Godwin for the Bucks both had limited practices on Wednesday. Brian Thomas Jr. practiced Wednesday. You like to see that. Jair Alexander was once with the Packers, then signed with the Ravens, got traded to the Eagles, was inactive last week. He has stepped away from the game of football and is trying to get right mentally and physically. So we wish him well. Sucks for the Eagles that they don't get to have him right now, but he could be back obviously at any time. He could decide to come back. Everything clears up, whatever. But wish well for him and just get right, man. That's how I feel about it. Ricky Pearsall. Shanahan came out today and said that the doctors have told him that Ricky Pearsall is healthy. He's not playing yet. Maybe he will. I think he was on the practice field today in a limited fashion. We'll see what happens going forward. But it's just interesting that Shanahan's – the way it was stated, I didn't hear Shanahan speak myself, but I did see the statement. And the way it was phrased made it sound like he expects him to be out there and he hasn't been out there, which is a weird thing if Pearsall doesn't feel healthy yet or, pain tolerance is one thing. There's a lot of things that goes into it, but it's just weird the way it was phrased. Brenton Strange told you he was in our waiver video. He had his practice window opened and actually was out on the practice field in a limited fashion today. Giants Graham Gano placed on IR, so Younghoe Koo is going to be the kicker there for the time being with the new head coach Mike Kafka, who also came out and said that Jameis Winston has moved into the number 2 spot and will likely start for Jackson Dart if he is out this week with the concussion. So very interesting development there. Russ shouldn't be on the field anymore in my mind. And Jameis Winston, everybody loves to see him come out and wing it. They still need to win games if they want to do anything. But right now they're dealing with an interim coach. They don't have their starting quarterback. Giants are having it in a bad way, but at least Jameis Winston, for fantasy people, we believe he'll be more successful, mainly because he ain't scared to throw the damn ball, which is what Russell Wilson looked like the other day. So, but development there in New York with the firing of Brian Daboll, and now Jameis Winston has moved to number 2. Russ is number 3. It could be a scenario where Russ asks for his release eventually, and they give it to him, and he goes and signs as a backup somewhere else. But we'll see what happens going forward. Calvin Ridley practiced Wednesday. He's been out since week 5, I think? Or no, week 6. Waiting for him to get back, but it's good news that he's practicing again. He was a trade candidate possibility for the deadline, didn't get moved. Now it sounds like he's going to be getting back to practice, possibly be able to play this week. Marcus Davenport and cornerback DJ Reed for the Lions had their practice windows opened and were practicing in limited fashion. Chris Rodriguez left the game with a shoulder injury last Sunday against the Lions for the Washington Commanders. He is practicing in full on Wednesday, and I expect him to be out there in Week 11. Cornerback Asante Samuel, who had a spinal fusion in the offseason to repair a neck injury, spinal injury. The specifics of it are still, not exact. I'm not a doctor. That's what I guess is the best way to put it. But he signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers practice squad and could be active here in the next week or so if he can get into shape. And that would be awesome for that Steelers defense. And it's good to see Samuel be able to have a chance to get back on the field. Neck injuries are always scary as hell. I've seen plenty of players not come back from them, and then other players be just fine with them. But we'll see what happens going forward. I wish him well. Maybe he can get back on the field and be that same player he was before the injury. And then the Patriots, speaking of the Thursday night football game, I'll go ahead and mention this. Ramondre Stevenson, Kayshon Boutte, and Austin Hooper have all been ruled out for the game. So Hunter Henry, Travion Henderson, Stephon Diggs, maybe even Demario Douglas or Kyle Williams. These are all guys to think about with that. Moving into the Thursday night football preview, we have the Jets versus the Patriots. Jets are 2-7. Patriots are 8-2. I think it's 7-game win streak now. Looking great. Defense is playing well. Drake May's been playing well. They're coming off, like I said, 7 straight wins. They go into this game. We got starts and sits for this game. Starts on the Jets side. Breece Hall is the only player I'm willing to say, hey, you can put him in your lineup with confidence. On the Patriots side, Travion Henderson, it sounds like he's going to get a full load with the other running backs being banged up, Stevenson being out. We're not sure if Jennings is going to play or not yet. Just something in. If Jennings doesn't play, Dearness Johnson obviously becomes a player that maybe you could consider, but I think Henderson's going to get the bulk of the touches. And after last week's performance, there's no reason not to. Drake May, you're starting him. Stephon Diggs, I'm starting him. And New England's defense, I am definitely starting them. Between their return game and the Jets offense, they should have a field day on Thursday night. Flex players for this game, Mason Taylor, I'm still willing to flex him out there. I know Fields only had like 42 yards passing or something last week. I feel like this is probably a game that they're going to pass a little bit more, mainly because the Patriots are tough against the run. And last game, they had 2 special teams touchdowns where the offense didn't even get on the field in the first quarter. So all things to consider when going into it, but I'm not recommending starting a lot of Jets today. That's all there is to it. On the other side, Hunter Henry with Austin Hooper out. Henry should be that guy at the tight end spot that Drake May is looking for. I think you can go ahead and start him this week as a lower-end tight end, but still someone that you can get some points from. And Demario Douglas, he's a flex player. I'm trying not to start him, but this is a guy that had 3 touchdowns in 3 games in a row before last week. I know last week was a dud. He was my sneaky start last week again. Didn't work out. Kyle Williams ended up being the guy that got the big play. And it's a guy that's definitely worthy of looking at for sure. But Demario Douglas has been the guy that's been there. Bootie's out again. I would expect him to have a little more success this week. Sits for this game, Justin Fields, Isaiah Davis. I considered Isaiah Davis as like a flex player just because people are in need of running backs. But I just don't feel good against this run defense of the Patriots. And with him not doing the returns as much anymore, you seen that last week with, what's his name, Ngakoue and Isaiah Williams were the ones that got the return touchdowns. Jets defense, to me, I thought about putting them in a flex as well because of their return game. But the odds of them getting another big return touchdown, probably not as high, especially with the way they did it last week. New England's going to try to prepare for that. And then A.D. Mitchell. I'm not sure if he's even going to be active. He was inactive last week after the trade with Sauce Gardner to the Colts. He came back in that deal. He was inactive last week, which generally when people are traded, they're not active week 1 when they're playing a position where you got to learn all the calls and everything else. Now, we saw Jacoby Myers get on the field for the Jags, a handful of plays. If A.D. Mitchell is playing, I'm not saying it's a terrible shot in the dark, but it's just not something I would recommend. On the other side, for the Patriots, obviously Boutte and Stevenson are out. Austin Hooper's out, so you can't start any of them. I mean, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it. And then Matt Collins, he had a decent day last week, but I'm not willing to say you got to start him. Matt Collins is like once every 6 weeks he has a good day. Maybe he has another good day, but it's not something I'm betting on. And then the kicker, Borregales, I almost thought about telling you can start it, but I just don't. I don't trust the guy. And then my sneaky start for this game is Kyle Williams, the rookie. After last week's showing with Boutte out, this guy could be someone you could stick in a flex spot this week. Well, I guess you'd want to stick him in your main spot so you have the flex option on Sunday. But someone that you could throw in a lineup and hope for that big play to hit. And if it does, especially in those leagues that give bonuses for like 40-plus yard plays, this is a guy that could definitely have a 40-plus yard play against this defense who's traded Sauce. DJ Reed left in offseason. They're banged up. They give up big plays at times, and it's something that I think that Kyle Williams could definitely be a player that could hit that. And then the last thing I want to get into, guys, speaking of the Jets, we'll bring them up in this category as well because this is the defensive return game that I've been talking about. Like I said, I've mentioned a couple times this season. I think it's interesting to know how teams are doing with the new rule changes to the kickoff. Like I said before, I expected this to happen last year with the change in format where they moved where the players are located for each teams before the kick, and that nobody can move until the ball is touched by the returner. It's all interesting what they did. I expected some big returns last year. We had a couple, but not nearly as many. In 2024, across the whole NFL, there were 13 return touchdowns. In 2025, there have already been 12 through 10 weeks. And this is what I'm talking about. There's a difference in the return game. And it's not just touchdowns, it's yards too. And yards are the biggest impact because they're helping defenses in fantasy not get ones and twos. They're getting 8s and 9s and 11s instead of -1, 3s, and 4s. You know what I mean? It's just changed the scoring for fantasy defenses. And it's changed the field position for the NFL. In 2024, the league average was 26.9 per return. That hasn't changed as much, like return, I guess, per return. It's just about we're getting more return opportunities. The Browns led the league in 2024 with 1,468 total return yards, punt and kick return total yards. There were 19 teams with over 1,000 yards in 2024. Through 2025 through 10 games, the Jets have 1,741 return yards between punt and kick returns. And they only had the 2 touchdowns from last week. But they've been averaging like 170 or something like that. I think it's 193.4 yards per game. That's what they've been averaging in 2025, the Jets, for their total return game. That's changing the way the defense is scoring points if your leagues give return yardage. And you think the Jets would have more success on offense with the field position that they're getting with these return games. Like, it's so wild. I mean, how much people are they changed the rules. Like I said, they adjusted the rules to where the ball will be placed if it's kicked in the zone, if it's kicked before the zone, if it's kicked out of the end zone. It definitely changes where the ball will be placed now. Whereas last year they didn't have those slight adjustments about ball placement. It was just about trying to change the kick return to make it safer and to make it more intriguing. Last year, most of the teams just kicked it out the back of the end zone. They didn't want to deal with it. There were still things to learn about it. Once they made those adjustments this offseason, it's completely changed the return game for the NFL, especially in the kick return game. Punt returns, they've always done those. That's always by chance. But you could see that punt returns there's definitely some more touchdowns this year even than there were last year. But the kick return game is the biggest impact where you see the biggest impact from last year and years past to this year. We've only had 2 years of the new format of where the players are placed on the kickoff. But between last year and this year, it is completely different. Like I said, last year the Browns led it with 1,468. The Jets have 1,741 return yards through 9 games. Through 9 games. They've already had their bye. 19 teams with over 1,000 yards in 2024. There are 27 teams that already have 1,000 yards by week 10. 27 of 32 teams have 1,000 return yards. 8 are over 1,200 already. Last year, the Browns led the league with over 1,400. There's already 8 teams with 1,200. This is the difference that is being made with these slight adjustments. I think it's great. I think it's amazing. It's making players more valuable in fantasy. It's making a difference in the NFL game that we haven't seen in the return game, kicking game, whatever you want, special teams part of the game in a long time. So it's definitely an interesting thing. But my advice based off all this is get players with kick and punt return capabilities that are already secondary, like a number 2 receiver that also does punt returns or does kick returns, a number 2 or number 3 running back that also does kick returns. These players are being more valuable. And the defenses aren't being hurt as much in bad matchups because of return games. Because even if the other team scores, they're kicking it off and you're getting a point or 2 back on a return, which is awesome. Through 10 weeks, the top 5 teams that have return yards, the Jets lead it, like I said, with 1,741 yards. The Commanders are number 2 with 1,490 yards. Dolphins, 1,404 yards. Giants, 1,315. And the Titans followed them up at number 5 with 1,303. So there's 5 teams with over 1,300, 8 teams with over 1,200, and 27 teams with over 1,000 return yards. I know it's not a big deal to a lot of people, but to a fan of the game of football and to a fan of fantasy defenses, because in my home league, we still play with them. It's mattered. It's made a change. It's made a change in the NFL game. It's made a change for fantasy defenses. and for players, wide receivers, kick returners that get return yardage points in fantasy leagues. So, in my mind, the NFL succeeded with these rule changes. I think it's great for the league. I think it's great for those players that play special teams. It's bringing some more recognition to them, possibly earning them some more money in the offseason. All things that are positives for the NFL. And in fact, like I said, I've been noticing it all season. I started noticing week 2, week 3, because I started the season with the Jets defense. I expected them to be a better defense. And they were still scoring points, even though they weren't getting turnovers. So I was like, how are they doing this? And that's when I started paying attention. Now it's 10 weeks in, plenty of stats to show. The Jets are averaging 193 return yards a game between punt and kick returns. That's awesome. That's 7 points in my home league. It's every 25 yards for a point in my home league for return yards for defenses or kick returners, punt returners. So every 25 yards, you get a point. That's 7 points for the Jets defense. Starting off, before they get a sack, before they get an interception, before they give up any points. You're already plus 7 because of their return game. And if you can find the defenses that have that and are actually good, like the Patriots have had a good return game and they've been a good defense all season. That's why they're a top 5 defense in fantasy. So just something to pay attention to, guys, something to think about when you're making waiver ads, when you're looking at, which defense should I pick up for a bye week filler? Look at their return yards if your league gives up return points. And for the NFL, for NFL fans in general, man, it's just awesome to see, because if we can get some more players, you're going to see players drafted as a strategy in my mind because of this. You're going to see a 5th rounder go at the end of the 3rd because of his return capabilities and how much damage that could do with a field position game in the NFL. So, like I said, just something interesting I thought I've been paying attention to, and something that you should be thinking about in fantasy and for your NFL teams, man. Who are you going to draft? Who should I pick up? All that type of stuff. You're going to see teams start to pay attention to it. You're going to see special teams coordinators out there looking for the next Devin Hester, looking for the Cordell Patterson, looking for the Percy Harvins. Those guys were all great kick returners. Josh Cribbs for the Browns back in the day. Those guys were impactful, and that was with the old format. Now with the new format, you're going to probably have to find a little bit different player, more Devin Hester than just the speed guy or the power guy. But like I said, just something interesting to me, and maybe interesting to you guys as well. Other than that, we're going to get out of here. Hope you're having a good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time you're watching. Until next time, I'm out. First down, Punts!